right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for this Vermont Community Leadership Network workshop. I'm Jenna Kolaski. I work for the Vermont Council on Rural Development. We are a neutral, independent facilitator of community and public process in Vermont. And we work with communities all around the state to help identify and move forward key priorities for the future of towns, but we also facilitate conversations at the state level on issues that impact rural communities. Several years ago, kind of peak pandemic, is when we launched this community leadership network, because what we do know in our work is that things are only successful and only move forward in communities where there are strong, dedicated, caring, loyal volunteers and leaders that step up and sign up to take things on for the future of their towns. And there seemed to be a real drive and interest in connecting wonderful leaders like yourselves around the state to learn together, to connect to resources, to share skills. And so that's what the Leadership Network is all about. We hold a series of workshops throughout the year. And this is now our second annual legislative roundup. Starting last year and then again this year, we really wanted, recognizing that there's so much going on in the Statehouse during the legislative session, and a lot of those changes that are made, decisions that are made, have real impact on rural communities. But sometimes it can be difficult to really wrap your head around all those changes that are happening, things that are coming your way, decisions that were made. And so this workshop is really to bring together an array of different experts and voices that have been deeply involved in those conversations and help to maybe translate some of those changes and bring them all to you. So in a moment, we're going to hear from our panel. We have Chris Cochran from Department of Housing and Community Development, Representatives Sims and Sibilia, and then along with Lisa Hango, who are the chairs of the Rural Caucus in the state legislature. And then we also have Karen Horn from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So we'll turn it over to them in a moment. There's one thing I really quickly wanted to share with you all. We have with us Karen Herzog and Alex Jeffrey from the Vermont Community Broadband Board, Heron, and from Vernonburg Group. And these folks are leading an initiative that Council on Rural Development has been involved in a bit to do an analysis of digital equity around the state as we make plans to improve digital equity as we bring broadband to the rural parts of our state. And so I wanted to give them a little bit of time to share some ways that you might be able to weigh in on that process as they launch. Alex and Heron, I'll let you both take it away.
Thanks, Jenna, and thank you so much, everybody, for your time this morning. I know you have a really valuable agenda planned, so we really appreciate you giving us 5 minutes of it. So yes, my name is Alex Jeffrey, and I am part of a consulting team that is working with the Vermont Community Broadband Board to develop their Internet for All plans. And I'm here with my colleague, Heron. Heron, do you want to say hi and wave?
Sure. Hello, everybody. We're really happy to be here, and thanks for having us. This is a really great group. Excited to be here just as a person, not only presenting. So thank you for having us. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Heron. Yeah, so we are developing Internet for All plans. So there are the federal government in 2021 through the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act created 2 different programs: the BEAD, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and the Digital Equity Program. And those are mechanisms to distribute over $45 billion of federal funding through those 2 programs. And in order to meet the requirements of the programs and for Vermont to get its full allocation, so from BEAD, really exciting, it was announced yesterday that Vermont will receive $228 million to help close the digital divide and to to build out these infrastructure projects to get every Vermonter connected to high-speed, affordable, reliable broadband. So as a part of that effort to actually secure that $228 million, we are developing these plans that will say what's going to happen with this money and how Vermont is going to make the most of it and how Vermont plans to achieve this goal of connecting every Vermont household and business. As a part of that, it is both a requirement of the federal grants and also something that is core to the VCBB strategy and approach, that these plans are really informed by the lived experience and feedback of Vermonters. So you may have seen in the media or on social media, we've been doing events around the state, virtual and in-person listening sessions. We've got a survey out, and the survey is what we came here to plug today. It's really important that we're getting as much feedback as possible and that we're getting it from all segments of the Vermont population. Specifically, we've paid a lot of attention to different historically underrepresented communities. So we really want to make sure we're hearing from those folks and make sure we're getting, quality data as we are drafting and preparing these plans to submit to NTIA. So given, the wide reach of this group, all of you are leaders in your communities, we'd love to distribute the survey to you all, both so you can take it yourselves, of course, and then if you have any opportunity, please amplify it to your communities. We want to get feedback from every segment of Vermont, everywhere in Vermont, and connecting with you all and having this distributed by trusted community partners and trusted community leaders is really a core part of that. So I have dropped in the chat, just, it's sometimes helpful to have kind of a prepared little paragraph of what this is and what we're asking for. So I wrote a paragraph that you all can feel free to use and share, and then I dropped the survey link. So please, please, please fill it out yourselves, distribute it far and wide, and you will be directly contributing to Vermont's preparation of these plans and to successfully, achieving this goal of creating true digital inclusion and closing the digital divide in Vermont. So I will pause there, see if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it right back over to you, Jenna, so you can get on with your incredible panel. And thank you all so much for your time.
Great. Anyone have a question for Heron and Alex? Not seeing any hands. And I should say, and this goes for later in our panel discussion too, if you have a question or want to chime in, you can use the raised hand function in Zoom, or if you're having trouble finding that, feel free to turn on your camera and wave at me, or just unmute and shout if you want to chime in when we open it up for questions. But not seeing any questions, Alex, but this is super helpful. Thank you for sharing. We will be sharing this in the follow-up email as well, so that you all have access to this. And then we'll also be sharing with our kind of broader newsletter. And just really quickly, Alex, so folks know, I don't think I heard, did you list what those kind of underserved populations are that you're trying to prioritize and reach?
I did not. No, that was a great thought, Jenna. So there's a bunch of them. So migrant farm workers is one, children and youth is one, low-income households, the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, people with disabilities, people who are deaf, blind, deaf disabled, late deafened, and hard of hearing, racial and ethnic minorities, religious minorities, the LGBTQIA plus community. Basically, if you can think of a population that has been historically excluded, that's who we're trying to talk to. I don't think that was an exhaustive list, but I think that got me pretty close.
Okay, so in particular, if you have connections and ways to get it out through those communities, that would be really, really helpful.
Really especially useful. Yep. Thank you, Jenna.
All right, well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And I want to shift to our panel, knowing that we only have one of our panelists for a little bit more time here. So let's dive right in. So the idea here is we wanted to be sure to hear, from our legislative leaders, administrative leaders, as well as kind of an advocacy group that can share what they're seeing. And so I'd love to hear, let's open it up to each panelist to start by just sharing the maybe key, like 2 to 4 key takeaways, successes, things that you're focused on from this last session, and especially those things that really impact our communities and community leaders. And Representative Sibilia, I'll start with you to kick us off.
Thanks, Jenna, and I'm really happy to be here today. So excited to be here with my colleagues, my amazing leadership co-workers for the Rural Caucus, Representative Sims and Representative Hango. Really pleased this year at our ability to work together and work with the Senate to move forward and highlight some key initiatives. I'm sure that Representative Sims will add to these. Probably the first thing that comes to mind for me is the work that we did on rural capacity with the Senate and the governor's office. A lot of support from the speaker that was included in the budget adjustment. And those were funds that we had been talking about coming into the legislative session. And in fact, Representative Sims and I had highlighted that coming into the session, that with all of the federal opportunity that had been coming in, we were really worried about the capacity of our rural communities to leverage those dollars and make one-time investments, which are critical right now when we're looking at climate change, the energy transition, digitization of our economy. And so really excited that we got that work done. We know that Doug Farnham from the governor's team is working on that with communities. I do not view that as, project completed. It's really working with our most needy communities, but the amount of work that's needed here is huge. And the other thing that I'm really excited about that we did, and again, I think, just a step, is some of the work that we did in the housing bill, particularly on Act 250 exemptions. I don't think, there are good uses for Act 250. We do want to preserve our landscape, our habitats, but we have to think about where we want people. And with our housing bill, we removed some Act 250 exemptions, or we made some Act 250 exemptions in places where we want people to live, and made it a little bit easier for where we want the people as opposed to where we want to protect the environment. Municipal technical assistance grants, yes. Thank you, Katherine. And then I would also add, we get a temporary exemption. We need to think more about this in the coming years for rebuilding some critical infrastructure, in particular our electric infrastructure. We know we have a lot of old lines through the woods, and with climate change and increasing storms, we know we also need to bury lines, and those have been subjected to Act 250 permitting, and that's really been holding up really some urgently needed work. So those are the two things that I wanted to highlight, and I'll pass the baton.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. Appreciate it. And I know you can stay on for a little bit longer, and feel free to chime in and add as we go here before you need to jump off. I think maybe what I'll do is move away from the legislature and then come back and maybe jump to Chris next. Do you want to share some of your key takeaways from this session?
Yeah, absolutely. Chris Cochran here from the Department of Housing and Community Development, and I want to thank the members and the leadership of the Rural Caucus for their support for legislative action in the session, and also the League of Cities and Towns. It was a busy and productive session with a lot of things happening. No surprise, as the state agency focused on housing, our focus was, as to use the speaker's quote, was housing, housing, housing. And it was a big year. We worked very hard on a complicated bill called S-100, ultimately became Act 47, otherwise known as the Home Act. And Representative Sibilia mentioned a few things in there, but I'm going to just add a few more details. At the high level, The bill aimed to align our local regulations, so that's our zoning bylaws, with state permitting programs, Act 250 and others, to ensure that we can build the housing Vermonters need more quickly. It also included millions of dollars in funding to ensure housing gets built in the right location. It was a pretty substantial bill. I think if you look across the nation, several states have looked at how can we create housing more quickly, and they looked at preemptions to local zoning. I think Vermont is the 5th state in the nation, following some communities out west, California, Oregon, and some other Midwest states. But what it does is, removes the barriers that we're often hearing that are holding up the housing projects and development projects. So it eases over zealous parking requirements. It increases the density in areas with sewer and water. Now, these are areas that the state and the federal government have invested millions and millions of dollars in. Many communities, it's not being utilized to its maximum extent. To pick up what Representative Sibilia said, these are areas where we want to see more people, where we want development to go. But often local zoning creates a lower density environment where homes can't be built. And if you can't get a local permit, you're not going to build anything. Other things that it does is statewide, it enables duplexes, and it eases the permitting process for multifamily dwelling units as well as accessory dwelling units, otherwise kind of known as mother-in-law apartments or backyard apartments. At the state level, as Laura mentioned, in in my division, what we do is we run the state designation programs. If you don't know about them, we designate communities for targeted benefits of very small geographies, so downtowns, villages, etc. It changed the Act 250 jurisdictional threshold, so from 10, which is the standard across the state, to 25 in certain designated centers, including village centers. So that's a huge change that will speed the production of housing in areas where we'd like to see growth to happen. It also made changes to priority housing projects to ensure that we have affordable housing in our community centers. If you create an affordable housing project, you can build an unlimited amount of housing units within one of these designated centers. It also included several studies to take a look at how we're doing on a range of things from the state designation programs. It asks us to take a look at those and look at ways how we can consolidate and streamline those. And I'll talk more about those in a second, or probably later in the show. It asks us to look at building codes and how building codes can create barriers. It also is looking at energy codes and seeing if there's opportunities to link building and energy codes better. There's a study on Act 250 on how to improve that. So it is going to be a busy, busy summer, and this is teeing up a lot of legislative action for the next session. So this was part one of a big land use conversation that will continue into the next session. So I'll leave it there for now. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but it was a very significant bill. The one thing I just want to mention, I know many of you folks are municipal leaders, is during the veto session, so last week, there was a provision that accelerated the enactment of this bill, of the local zoning provisions. They were to go into effect December of next year, but now they've been advanced. So the zoning provisions to enable greater density within sewer and water service areas will go into effect July 1. Later today, I'm on a call with our regional planning commission partners to provide tools and resources to help towns quickly implement these laws. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. And I think it would be really interesting a little bit later to get into some of those designation programs and what's happening there as well. Yeah. Let's go to Representative Sims. Do you want to share next some takeaways from the session?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Jenna and VCRD, for hosting. Great to be here with others, reflecting on what was a pretty big first year of the biennium and the work that we can tee up for the coming session. So, we had a huge opportunity this year to make, one-time and ongoing investments in critical infrastructure and services that Vermonters have for too long gone without: housing, childcare, internet, healthcare, it's hard to pick just one or two things to highlight, but I will try my best here and would certainly echo Chris and Rep. Sibilia's comments about S100 and the Home Act and the really important work there to address the housing crisis here in Vermont and accelerate the development of new housing in places where we want it. And so I will add that H217, the child care bill, I think was a huge success that really makes Vermont a leader nationally around childcare by making transformational investments in our childcare system to make childcare more affordable for more Vermont families, to provide additional financial supports for our childcare centers and home daycare providers, and to help support our critical early childhood workforce so that more families can have access to the childcare they need and more employers have workers who have access to childcare and can make it to work every day. So that I think was a huge win for Vermont. And I would also highlight the work that we did around healthcare and our investments in provider reimbursement rates. So our budget included nearly $100 million to increase rates for primary and specialty care providers, dental care, home health, nursing, residential care, adult day, mental health, EMS, emergency medical services providers, recognizing that for too long, these rates haven't kept up with the cost of providing healthcare services, and increasing these rates will help us attract and recruit the workforce we need, help free up hospital emergency rooms, and make sure that Vermonters get the healthcare that they need when they need it. And within that, I would particularly highlight some of the work that we did around emergency medical services. When you have a health event and you dial 911 and you need an ambulance there, we want to make sure that there's someone to answer the phone and to get that ambulance to you. And unfortunately, that system is really in crisis. And so we were able to do a number of things in the budget around EMS to try to help stabilize that system, including increasing the Medicaid reimbursement rates, investing $1 million in training for EMS personnel, and commissioning a report, which will come back to the legislature next session to look at kind of long-term funding and structure solutions to make sure that everywhere in Vermont has a functioning, stable EMS system in place. So childcare and our healthcare investments are two of the pieces that I would highlight from the session. And looking forward to hearing what Karen adds to that list.
Great, thank you so much. Karen, let's go to you. And am I right that you're retiring tomorrow? Is this one of your last engagements with the league?
Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you got plenty of time left.
People have already touched on a bunch of the issues that we followed pretty closely in our priorities. The home bill, of course, the housing bill, we spent a lot of time on that. I did want to mention that also because H171 passed in the veto session, it does have some additional provisions that would be of interest to local officials. Beginning in the Agency of Human Services is going to be required to report on a monthly basis to the Joint Fiscal Committee around the homeless issue and making sure that everybody has a place to live. And beginning in September, the Agency of Human Services, which is a new player in this particular conversation, is to identify any rules, state rules or local regulations and ordinances that impede the timely development of safe, decent, affordable housing. So I think that we may hear some pretty different proposals because it's a different agency that's engaging in that conversation. And they also need to identify areas in which flexibility or discretion are available in applying rules, regulations, and ordinances, and advise whether temporary suspension of those rules or ordinances is needed. And then just one other note with respect to this bill, there is I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play out, but the budget had appropriated matching dollars for water and wastewater grants to municipalities, not only in the current biennium years, FY24 and FY25, but also FY26 and 27, the 2 out years, because they wanted to assure that those federal dollars would be matched. And there is language in H171 that might provide for those out year dollars to be diverted to the emergency housing program. So I just wanted to note that for folks. A couple of other bills that haven't been mentioned yet. Part of the appropriations bill set up a public safety dispatch committee. So they are supposed to, out of the Department of Public Safety, they're supposed to come up with a solution, long-term solution to the dispatch issue. This has been studied any number of times in the past, but I think they mean business this time. So that's one of the issues that we focused on. Gwen Zakoff, who is also resigned from the League of Cities and Towns. That was her one of her primary issue areas. As a lot of local officials already know, there was a reappraisal bill that passed the legislature this year. It's putting towns, is directing the Department of Taxes to put towns on a schedule for reappraising properties. So the idea is that instead of, I'm not going to go too far into the weeds, don't worry, Jenna, but instead of falling below a common level of appraisal figure that's established by the Department of Taxes, which essentially means that if your appraisal level assessment level in your town is more than 85% below the statewide assessment levels that are determined for that town, then you need to reappraise. That's the situation right now. There's 160 some towns that are on the list that need to reappraise. There aren't the reappraisal firms to do it. And so some towns are looking out 4 or 5 years. And this would direct the Department of Taxes to put towns essentially on a 6-year schedule, rolling schedule that's predictable for reappraisals. And we had actually supported that move. It's what happens in the rest of the country. The Department of Taxes also needs to look at preliminary schedules to phase in the full reappraisals, look at existing municipal data that can be used to differentiate property types. So residential, second home, commercial, retail, those kinds of categories, including use occupancy. So I think they're really trying to get to the short-term rentals in that aspect, and square footage of properties, which is a new category. It'll be interesting to see how well they're able to do that. They need to look at options for and implement implicit bias reduction training for listers and assessors. And they need to come up with recommendations for changing the annual date by which grand lists must be lodged with the department. And right now that date is April 1, and they're suggesting that maybe January 1 would be a better date. So a lot of changes coming around the whole reappraisal system. The department is obligated to reach out to local officials and other stakeholders around these issues. And so if you have that interest, I would definitely sort of keep your ears open as to when they start that process. And then a couple of other things I just wanted to mention really quickly. The Municipal Technical Assistance Program that Representative Sibilia talked about It's through the Agency of Administration. I believe I sent Jenna and Alyssa the website for that. There is a vulnerable communities index there. So those towns that are top on that index list should be receiving a call from either the Regional Commission or other consultants with the agency to look at how they can assist with accessing programs. The website also includes the programs, mostly ARPA funded and federal COVID related funding, that are available to municipalities. So it's a good reference list for you. And then I would also recommend to you the VLCT Federal Funding Assistance Program, and we put out a guidebook. Katie Buckley and Bonnie Weiniger here put out a guidebook of the federal dollars and funding programs that are actually ones that municipalities in Vermont can access, because not all of them would actually be available to local governments. So that's most of what I wanted to let you know about. The only other point with respect to the EMS emergency medical services funding is that I believe there's only 4 volunteer emergency medical service ambulance services left in the state of Vermont. So what do we do to replace those lost services? And it's really asking a huge amount of volunteers to do the training and provide the hours and commitment around EMS. So that is a crisis that thankfully the legislature has started to address. And I think that's probably plenty for right now.
Great, thank you, Karen. And a few kind of logistical things before I move on to a next question. In addition to all of those highlights that Karen just shared, VLCT does have kind of a full legislative session wrap up with a lot more detail, and Alyssa just linked that in the chat. And I wanted everyone to know that any of these links that you're seeing in the chat, we'll share these in a follow-up email as well. I'm also starting to see some questions coming through in the chat, which is great. Feel free to keep plugging questions in there, and we are going to carve out some time at the end for some questions and discussion as well. So we'll certainly scroll back through and get to those questions. So I wanted to, and actually, Karen, you started to answer this question a little bit. I think it's really helpful for folks to hear some of these decisions and changes and resources coming to communities. But I wanted to maybe get a little more explicit about what steps community leaders or municipal leaders could take now to make sure to connect to these resources. So either steps that could be taken or places to go for help. And Chris, Karen, would love for you both to chime in. Also, Katherine, feel free to as well. And Representative Sibilia had to jump off, but we do have Representative Hango with us, and I wanted to welcome you to chime in on anywhere that makes sense as well. So maybe I'll start with Chris or Karen. Karen, you already mentioned the VLCT Federal Funding Assistance Program, which is great. But what about other places that communities could go if they want to dive into some of these resources coming out to build capacity in communities? They're looking for wastewater resources or technical assistance. Where would you all suggest people turn?
I was going first going to the Municipal Technical Assistance page at the Agency of Administration, Department of Finance, just for sort of a general listing of some of those. And then really what the legislature funded Katie Buckley and Bonnie Weiniger at the VLCT to help direct towns to where they might get the best results for their efforts in terms of accessing any of these programs. And we're working in partnership with the regional commission. So you can also contact your regional commission and ask for assistance The Municipal Technical Assistance Program at the Agency of Administration is not exclusive to regional commissions, so there may be some private consultants also that are available to help there, but I think you can find a lot of that information either at VLCT or at the Agency of Administration. I did want to add, I forgot one, there are little pots of money throughout the bills that came through this year. And one of them in the transportation bill, which is Act 62, would provide up to $2,500 to municipalities to help them buy electric vehicles. So of course that doesn't get you very far for an electric grader if that creature exists yet, but e-bikes and converting some of your other fleet, it might help. That's something to think about.
Do other panelists have suggestions for resources or what communities could be doing to make sure they're setting themselves up to access resources? Chris?
I'll add quickly. I mentioned, the state designation programs. There are several of them, and I'll encourage you to look at our website. But the village center designation is a very easy process. You can work with the regional planning commission to achieve that designation. As I noted, it'll grant that very small geography of that location an Act 250 exemption. But the other thing it does is it gives the community in that area priority consideration for other state grants. So grants for infrastructure from VTrans. So if you want to make bike and pedestrian improvements in your village center, if you want to improve your water or wastewater systems, our sister agencies do recognize the designation, and that's a way to give you a leg up. How agencies prioritize is their discretion, but if you're on the cusp of like getting funded or not, often the designation makes the difference. So I encourage you to seek information on the designation process. We have a great team who will come to your community, walk you through the process, and it's fairly speedy. So that's one thing to look at. The other thing too is, communities who want to take advantage of these, this largesse that we have, you really need a plan in place, and you need to have your community engaged in what your priorities are. And the Municipal Planning Grant Program is a great tool. It's a flexible tool. We'll post the grant announcement for that in the coming weeks. It provides flexible resources, state funds to help communities figure out what their priorities are and develop a plan to implement them. The money was increased this year, so it's near $900,000. And this funding may also be used to support the implementation of S100. So helping update your zoning regulations to support housing in your downtown village center or in other places in your community. So those are a few things you could do quickly and right now to take advantage of this funding.
Great, thank you, Chris. Any other suggestions from Katherine or Lisa as well? Great. Well, so I did want to ask this question, and I'm curious, a lot of communities are coming to us, really interested in social justice issues, in racial equity issues in their communities. We've seen some programs like the IDEAL program through the League with the Office of Racial Equity. I'm just curious if there's anything that emerged in this session related to those issues that communities might want to be aware of. And I don't know, Representative Sims, maybe I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the kind of one big piece that comes immediately to mind for me is really actually work we did last session that is, moving forward this year, and that's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So the 3 commissioners were appointed this year, and that's, one opportunity to really hold space and sort of think about our past and what we can and should do moving forward to address harms. So excited to really see that commission stood up and begin its work, and I expect we'll be hearing a lot more as the commissioners move forward in their work. So yeah, curious what others would add about work we did around these important issues this year.
There is a whole lot going on in the background, I would say, around that. In Representative Sims, you're right that the Office of Racial Equity, one of the things that they started was the IDEO program, which is really focused on local governments. And the League of Cities and Towns also worked with Jude Raquel Smith and her group, and 8 towns, I think it was 8 towns as the initial, but as a welcoming and engaging communities cohort. And we're hoping to expand that program going forward to really sort of what municipalities have done, are doing, what maybe blind spots are, and how we can move forward on addressing these issues. And then I also have to mention that there's more than towns now that have adopted the declaration, which was
Karen, you cut out for just 1 second there. Could you say that again? They adopted the
Declaration of Inclusion, which a statement around being inclusive and welcoming everybody, and that it was initiated by actually a few that started going around to towns and talking to them about really the first saying what your intention is going forward, and that we're pretty pleased with the fact that there's more than 100 towns that have adopted that.
Great. Thanks, Karen.
I'll mention just quickly, working in a partnership with the Vermont Department of Health, my department has this, it's a pilot initiative, but it's the Health Equity and Community Design Technical Assistance Program. And I'll post the link to it in the chat, but it's, there's a cool podcast to talk about how to increase health equity in your community. The program can bring tech training and technical assistance, design assistance, translator assistance, engagement assistance, artists, really anything you want to help shape your ideas and prioritize ideas to increase health equity and access in your community. It's a great program, and I think there was $500,000 in the budget for grants to continue this program into next year. So that's one thing, and I'll just post this in the chat right now for more information, but it's a great resource, good website. There's a few podcasts posted already. Check them out. They're pretty helpful.
That's great. Thanks for that reminder, Chris. I'd forgotten about that. So you're saying that may be open for next year, or is that still currently open?
It's currently open now.
Awesome. Yeah, if we could post that would be great. Excellent. Well, I think the last question I have, and then my goal here is to really turn this over. And actually, Buster, I think that a relevant question right now, actually, as we talk about the social equity issues. So I'm reading through the questions in the chat, and I am going to open it up to full questions. But the Vermont Land Access Opportunity Board, is that something that, Katherine, it looks like you're nodding your head. Maybe you could speak to that.
Not a great depth, other than that was something that we initiated last session, and this is a new board, I believe, with primarily BIPOC leadership, working in partnership with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and the budget this year, I think, included like $1 million to help advance the land access and advisory board's work. I don't have a great sense of the kind of details of what stage their work is at, but thinking about land repatriation and land access here in Vermont in partnership with our housing and conservation organization. So important stuff.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
If I could just add one more thing.
Sure.
The Climate Council has an equity subcommittee, had some significant and sometimes contentious conversations around what climate change is going to mean for vulnerable populations and historically neglected populations, and how we need to address those potential outcomes in the whole climate conversation. I think it's a fascinating area for some serious work we really weren't doing in the right way and got called on.
Great. Thanks, Karen. So I think maybe for the last question, I might go back to all of our panelists. I know it's hard to launch right into thinking about the next session when we just completed this one, but I know there's always priorities to work on going forward, and I'd be curious to hear from each of you as you think about maybe what wasn't accomplished this year or goals for next year. What are some priorities for you in the future? And maybe we'll start with Chris, and we can kind of go around to each of our panelists. What would be important for you that maybe wasn't accomplished or should be accomplished in the future?
Yeah, maybe wasn't accomplished. What was set to get accomplished was the reform and review of our state designation programs. They've been on the books for about 25 years. There's 5 of them. They're designed for different purposes, for different intents, and they never were really properly knit together. So last session, the legislature supported our request for to hire a consultant to assist us with this process. So we hired a national firm called Smart Growth America, working with some local consultants to really help us step back and evaluate the program. They're working on setting up a community engagement program, and I'll post some additional information on the website to roll out those next steps. But right now, at this point, what we want to encourage, we're interested in people's ideas about how the programs can be more effective, more meaningful. We want to streamline them to make sure that more communities can take advantage of these designations and not have to go through a cumbersome process. In the summer, in September, September 12th, mark the date, we have a big community forum planned to get everybody together to gather input and ideas on how to make the programs better. So that's one thing that that's going to be the focus of our summer. And I think the committees of jurisdiction are very interested in how we create kind of these compact and vital centers. And I think the designation programs are going to be an important tool to ensure that that can happen.
Great, thanks, Chris. And that's something we can certainly share in follow-up, but also in future VCLN newsletters, ways to engage in that September 12th forum.
Terrific, thank you.
So yeah, send us the info. Representative Hango, you've got a hand up. You want to weigh in on what you're looking for in the future?
Sure, thank you very much. I really want to thank everybody for their comments, because these are all really important things, and I see a lot of success in what we were able to accomplish this year. I would really like to continue work on the continued reform of Act 250 to make it easier for development in the right places in Vermont, so that we can continue to attract people and businesses to Vermont. Workforce development is really important to me and to the future of our state. And also the continued work on the stabilization and modernization of EMS and dispatch, which are really crucial to particularly our rural areas and our continued health in these areas. So thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to participate fully, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
Great, thanks. Glad you're able to weigh in. Appreciate it. Let's shift to Karen. So Karen, you may not be leading the charge next year for the league, but I'm curious, looking ahead to the next session, where do you think some of VLCT's priorities will be on behalf of communities?
Well, kind of a dangerous question to ask somebody who's exiting the forum. But reflecting on a very long career with the legislature, what we're finding is that local governments being directed to do more and more in pretty much every aspect of governance today. And they're not being given the resources, the flexibility, or the authority to accomplish a lot of those directives. And I, sort of circling back to something that we've harped on for many years, I think that the legislature this year moved in the direction of considering municipalities as partners in governance. And I think a lot of that conversation and hopeful direction was due to Representatives Sims and Sibilia and Hango in the Rural Caucus. But you cannot continually ask and presume that towns are going to do more when you don't give them the flexibility or the authority, and in many cases the dollars to do that. And I think EMS is a really good example. Dispatch is another really good example. Delegating Act 250 administration to the municipalities that have the capacity and you know, the ability to take on that delegation. The state government can't do it all. They don't do it all in other states, and there needs to be a better partnership. Good luck.
Thank you, Karen. Katherine, you want to share some closing words on what you hope for the next session or the future?
Yeah, thanks. Certainly echo what others have mentioned around the continuing work around EMS and you know, broader work around Act 250. Again, I think we did good work this year that we can continue to build on into the next year. And building on what Karen said, I think a real theme this year was around administrative capacity and how small towns really struggle when there's, you know, often 3 volunteer select board members and a part-time town clerk to really have the human capacity it takes to identify projects, find funding, and move them forward to action. And so really pleased that we were able to get the municipal technical assistance funding in the Budget Adjustment Act, but we all agreed that that was like a Band-Aid or a pilot. You know, let's do something immediately to help make sure that small communities don't miss out on the final federal and state ARPA funding, but that's not a long-term systemic solution around this challenge of ensuring that every community has the capacity it needs to chart a course towards a thriving future. And so, you know, look forward to continuing that conversation in the next session. We had envisioned a Rural Recovery Council that was in S100 that passed, but the funding was stripped and didn't make it into the final version of the budget. So we're, you know, talking with VCRD and other partners about how can we continue to do that work of bringing people together to say, what are the transformational changes that we need to make at a local level to ensure that our small towns have the capacity they need to do good work. And I really look forward to building on that conversation in the coming session. And the last thing I'll flag is, I think we've been doing a lot of good work around climate change and emission reductions. I hope that we can also continue to focus on climate resiliency and make sure that our small communities have access to the capital that they need to build climate resilient infrastructure, so that as we continue to experience more extreme weather events, that we're not leaving communities behind or without power or without access to critical infrastructure. So you know, lots more to continue to do in the coming session.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your reflections. I would love to kind of open it up to participants. And I want to think of this like certainly as a time for questions of our panelists, but also kind of more of a discussion. I'd love to hear from people on the call, and folks can feel free to turn your cameras on if you want. We can kind of engage in a group discussion. What are you seeing? What are your questions about this past session? What are things that maybe you had hoped for that you weren't seeing, or some things that you'd encourage our panelists here to think about for the coming year, or priorities that you might have, or concerns you might have for the coming years? Does anyone want to share reflections or thoughts or questions? I will start with a question from the chat as folks are thinking. And again, you know, you can put a question or comment in the chat. You can unmute and chime in, or if you go to reactions, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom. So there was the question about the Land Access Opportunity Board that we got to. I do want to get to this question about the Housing Pilot Kit program. Sounds great. The deadline to apply was last Friday, and 5 towns will be selected to participate. Any idea how many towns applied? Could the deadline be extended? Who could answer that question? I don't know about. Chris, do you?
I think it's us. This is a program that the legislature supported. It's we got a grant, and we've hired a technical assistance, a design firm to, implementing S100. What does small scale infill look like, and what kinds of houses do fit into the character of a village or a downtown center. We've never done a great job answering those questions, and we've never really kind of helped make the process easy. So what we're working on right now is basically a workbook or a lookbook of designs to kind of prime the pump and get these local conversations going. We're looking to partner with 5 communities to essentially do a charrette. The deadline was Friday to get those out, your request in to participate in this. We are going to select 5 communities. So I was thrilled to see the interest, but unfortunately we're limited to 5 communities at this time. Maybe if the interest continues, we can continue this conversation next year and expand the universe of communities to work with in the coming year.
And I'm assuming once that work is completed, there'll be some way to share like lessons learned and what communities have seen and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The communities that we're selecting, we're looking for different types of communities. So large and small communities, mix of, tourist towns, all different types. So we'll have some typologies. So the lessons learned from that experience will be applicable to other jurisdictions. And I'll also, let me look real quick. I'll post some additional information about the project and the initiative, but it should be a really fun and exciting program. We often don't get out of the office as much as we could, especially during the pandemic. So we're really looking forward to kind of getting our feet wet and getting back into communities and doing the work that matters the most to us.
Chris, do you know how many applied? How many towns applied?
Yeah, 22 communities applied.
22?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Buster, you've got your hand up for a question or comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you for your time and allowing many of us to join in. And as I drive around as an agricultural worker, a farm worker, connecting with both our farmers and housing organizations and etc., and even leaders at the Capitol, noticed many folks are still not aware of the Farm Worker Housing Repair Program, which came out funding through Vermont Housing Conservation Board with Champlain Housing Trust taking the lead and many others. So we definitely want to move that forward and keep that progress going. Learning the success of it. They squeeze the nickels into dimes. Really, that's what the Farm Worker Housing Repair Program is doing. It's squeezing nickels into dimes. It's an investment, and we need more investments in our agricultural workforce. It's very challenging, and housing is like a priority for many of us, much like you folks. And so we're accomplishing in meeting some needs, and our farmers needs too. They need the technical assistance of an organization, much like Champlain Housing Trust, that can help them navigate through the complications, because it's not easy. We all know it takes 8, 10, 12 funding sources to get one project done. So we need to keep that moving forward. And secondly, we need a committee working on farm labor housing. There's been many group discussions. I've been part of each and every one of them. And you folks need to learn more. And if you haven't read the 2021 report published, commissioned in part by the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, focused on farm worker housing. Please read that. It's only 65 pages. There's many reports we have to read. That's over 300 pages. So please learn more, dive in. And I say this because throughout the pandemic, many challenges we have faced, food securities being one of them. And we need to grow our food here with farmers and farm workers, and we all need to have a home to live in to do that. And we all need food. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Buster, for those comments. Appreciate it. I'm going to go to another question in the chat here, which is asking about S100, which specifies municipal water and sewer. It says we have sewer, but all water is currently private well. This will effectively eliminate the ability to use the provision in the bill to increase density zoning, etc. How can we handle this? Any of our panelists have an answer for?
I think I'll take that. S100 creates basically a minimum density requirement within sewer and water services areas. So it creates a statewide minimum. Cities and towns can do whatever they want as far as creating higher density housing opportunities. And the fact that you have a sewer system and presumably adequate water, you can really increase the density significantly in your areas where you'd like to see growth occur. If you want assistance on what that would look like and mapping that out, the program I mentioned earlier with the Municipal Planning Grant Program can assist your community in doing the analysis and assessment of kind of what the right type of density is for your community.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Any other, I don't know, Karen, do you have other reflections on that, or?
No, that is essentially what I was going to say as well.
Great. All right. Any other questions or comments that folks would want to share with the group or with our panelists?
Actually, Jenna, just to add to that, the Agency of Natural Resources has been directed to look at the permitting system for connections to municipal water and sewer systems and make recommendations on how to make it more affordable, how to eliminate duplicative permitting, how to simplify the process. And so if there are municipal officials that are interested in that, that's another piece to really keep your eyes open about.
Thank you. So I'll just open it up one last time for questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute and chime in if anyone wants to share some reflections. Catherine's asking, I'd love to hear the top issue in everyone's mind they'd like to see for next session. Anyone want to share a top issue that you have in your mind that maybe we didn't hear about today, or that our leaders should focus on for next session? And feel free to chime in the chat or weigh in as well. And maybe as people are kind of thinking and plugging things in the chat on that question, we've got a few minutes left. I would love to, this wasn't planned, so I'm kind of putting our speakers in the spot, but maybe just some last words from our panelists in closing. Anything that you want to share with this group, or as you think about the future of the work as it relates to rural communities. Closing words from each of our panelists. And maybe Karen, maybe we'll give you the last words.
Okay, I would say that with the turnover in the legislature this year was almost 40% new membership. There was a huge amount of energy and enthusiasm for moving ahead on so many of these fronts. And I think that's been fabulous. We've needed that for a long time, and I'm very hopeful about the direction that that some of these conversations are going to go in the next year. Hopefully also while keeping things affordable for Vermonters. But it is very encouraging to see all of this enthusiasm for for moving ahead on these multiple fronts.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for all your service to Vermont communities. Chris, some parting words that you'd want to share?
Yeah, a lot of the work we do is, looking what, Vermont's going to be now, look like 20 to 50 years down the road. And I think about climate change and the impacts that that's going to have on Vermont and its character. And, we saw during the pandemic, a lot of people moved to Vermont for its relative safety. And I do think that is coming. And I really want to urge, communities and our state policymakers to, think about, how do we set the stage for this to be a successful change? We do need more people in the state. We do need more young people. Where do we build the infrastructure? Where do we create the housing? How do we protect our natural resources to ensure that, what's important about Vermont is maintained while at the same time we grow? That's something that I think that it's going to take many sessions to tackle, but that's where I've been thinking about.
Great, thank you, Chris. Representative Hango, did you want to share any closing words or reflections?
I think I'm good, thank you. I just really thank everybody for being engaged, especially after such a long session. And I know people need to rest and recharge, but it's great that folks are still enthusiastic and wanting to move forward and thinking about it this early on.
Great. And Representative Sims.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just would maybe want to close by saying that my internet is unstable, so hopefully you can hear me.
We can, yes.
Work on broadband, okay. That your voice really matters. Really appreciate everyone showing up today for this conversation, and want to emphasize how the doors of the Statehouse are always open, and our committees really rely on hearing from Vermonters about what's working, what challenges they're facing, and what ideas you think we can move forward to action to make a difference. And so please know that your reps always want to hear from you. Committees want to hear from you. If you have ideas or want to give testimony, it really does matter and impact the work that we do. We're a small part-time citizen legislature and really rely on, the boots on the ground to guide our work. And, especially hearing from rural communities helps make sure that our work is guided by that lived experience. So thanks for being a part of this conversation, and please reach out to your reps and show up at the Statehouse because it will make a difference.
Thank you. Well, I want to echo that. Thanks to all of you for joining and for joining this conversation and also being a part of the Community Leadership Network. I will echo that it is so true that so much of the success and things happening at the community level in Vermont rely on folks like you. So thank you for your time. I would encourage everyone, just a plug from VCRD, to check out the Community Leadership Summit, which will be August 15th this year. A lot more there in terms of discussion about the future, but also skills and kind of project development and support for the work that you're doing today. So I think registration launches tomorrow, I'm pretty sure. So check out that website and join us for that conference in Randolph. And we will be in touch soon with follow-up, all the links that were shared in the chat and resources that our panelists shared. And then, of course, thank you so much to all of our panelists for being a part of the conversation and for all of your leadership on behalf of communities in Vermont. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks so much.